Hello and welcome to the Solo Inter podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things Inter. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, Joseph Fischetti, who is a calcio writer for Football Index and also has his own podcast, the Forza Napoli podcast. So, hello, Joseph. How are you doing?
Hi, Parm. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you, Joseph. Thank you for taking the time to join me. And it's really great to have you on the podcast. I've been a big fan of your podcast, which is the Forza Napoli podcast. There's some great content out there. So yeah, thank you for making that possible first. So I just wanted to get into the thick of things to begin with. Of course, which was the big talking point of this week, which was Inter Napoli. To begin with, how did you feel about the match? Just to lay out a few pointers, I felt, both teams gave each other a lot of respect. They didn't really want to take it to each other initially. They both were feeling each other out. So what was your, maybe let's say, tactical take, or, how do you feel the teams plan to set out? Like, how do you think this match was how do you think this match panned out?
Yeah, I mean it's obviously a disappointing result, but it's weird because it was a pretty decent performance that we put out there. Especially, having gone down a man, you would think that okay, that's it, game over, and we actually played better after the red card. But tactically, I was impressed as well. If you look at the matches Napoli played against Inter last season, we played very, very defensively, and that was in Gattuso's first, not even full season. It was half a season he took over. The first thing he did was switch to a very defensive 4-3-3 formation and really just try not to concede goals and look to counter. So I was pleased to see that this time around it was far more positive play. We didn't just sit back and let Inter come at us. We defended when we needed to, excuse me, and we dropped into the 4-4-2, and I was happy to see that we maintained our structure a lot better than we have in the last couple of matches, because that was a bit of an issue. But at the same time, when we got the ball, we looked to pass it around and to play our game. We didn't change our tactics too much. We stuck to what works well for us, and I thought it worked pretty well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joseph. As you described the match to begin with, you said, Napoli were playing their game. They were very comfortable in terms of going forward. With that being said, as you pointed out, I saw a lot of disappointment with a lot of Interisti after, especially you guys were down to 10 men because, in those moments of the match, you guys really took it to us. Lozano especially, he stepped up big time and he's been in great form this season. Last season he had his issues, settling in and, from what I had heard, Gattuso had also kicked him out of training once. But yeah, but Lozano this season, just to before touching upon the match again, Lozano this season has been really good. So what are your thoughts on him? Like, how do you think he's like? What's your take on how he has progressed so far?
Yeah, no, very, very happy. I think after the way last season went, there were a lot of Napoli fans that wanted him out already, which and you're almost seeing that a little bit, now with Andrea Patagna. But that's what I've been reminding my colleagues is that look, sometimes players need time when they're coming to a new team. In Lozano's case, coming to a new team in a new country, new coach, new system, and then you add the whole mutiny on top of that. Well, nobody's going to have a good season there, and then on top of that, Ancelotti was kind of using him out of position because of the formation that Ancelotti was playing with the 4-4-2. So Lozano was playing in a dual striker, and what we've seen is that he excels in a winger role, particularly on the right wing, but he's been doing well on the left wing as well. We're in a good we have a good problem, I guess you could say, with that position because Matteo Politano has been very, very good as well, and ex Interista, obviously. And so Gattuso has the luxury of being able to pick which winger he thinks matches up best against his opponents. I know a lot of Napoli fans want Lozano starting every game now because he's scoring at a high rate. But with the schedule the way it is, you do need to rotate or you're going to burn guys out. You're going to get injuries. So it's really nice to have two options that are both playing really well on the right wing. And then I also like that when Politano's not necessarily having a great game, you can bring Lozano off the bench. And now he's already got an advantage with his pace. But when you bring him with his pace against tired legs on top of that, he's going to have a lot of success. So yeah, very very happy with Lozano's progress.
Yeah, that's accurate. And looking at him in the match, like I remember, like I was just watching the match again actually, and yeah, as I said, both teams really didn't like, at least in the first half, didn't want to take it to each other because you've probably watched Inter this season. We concede a lot of goals, right? We've been conceding left, right, and center. And had we probably gone bonkers attacking, you would have probably ripped us apart on the counter because you guys are really good at that. You have been senior. You had Mertens before he unfortunately got injured. I hope he recovers soon. And you have Lozano, of course. So I think both teams wanted to feel each other out. And in the second half, yeah, I could see that change in Lozano. So, do you also, just to touch upon the tactical side of things, were you surprised, Joseph, that Diego Demel started instead of Fabian Ruiz? Because personally, to me, watching Napoli, it came as a surprise because I feel the midfield trio of Bakayoko, Fabian Ruiz, and Zielinski is probably likely to give you better attacking outcomes than having Diego Demma, who's more defensively solid. So, what do you think was Gattuso's mindset behind that?
Yeah, you know what? In when I did my uh, predicted 11, I did have Fabian over Diego Demme, but I wasn't. It wasn't didn't come as a huge shock to me either because I think you mentioned both sides were cautious in the first half. One of the I had two concerns with Inter squad. One was we didn't know if Hakimi was fit to play. Probably not. I wasn't shocked that he didn't start, but that worked out for us because I was very concerned about a healthy Hakimi, with his pace on the wing, and the other one's Nicola Barella. One of besides Lukaku, probably the most consistent, high performing player for Inter this season, and so when I thought about it, the combination of Bakayoko and Demic kind of made sense because you have Bakayoko who has the size and the strength that can help deal with Lukaku, um, and then you have Demme, who's a bit more agile, and he plays with Grinta. He's very tough for his size. So I thought actually he's the perfect person to counter Barella, and I think that worked well, right? Like Barella still had a good game, he always does, but we forced him out to the wing a lot, and at least he wasn't as much of a goal scoring threat. We saw that volley that he scored from the middle of the field, top of the box. So pushing him out wide to the wing, he's less of a goal scoring threat. He still made a couple of decent plays, like he got that interception that led to the Lautaro chance. He played the cross. I think it was Gagliardini that headed it, and Ospina made the save. So Barella is the type of player that he's always going to be good, but if you can limit the damage that he does, then that obviously helps. And I thought Demme was good for that. Fabian was also coming off a really poor performance against Sampdoria, and the reason why I had him starting was because Gattuso talked after the match about how Fabian was pretty sorry about his performance, and Gattuso told him, look, we play every 3 days. You're gonna have plenty of opportunities to redeem yourself. So I thought he might throw him right back in there to give him that chance right away. But then again, yes, we sacrificed a little bit on the attack, but I think this was still a mentality of let's try not to concede and we'll play our game when we get the ball. And Dem is good enough that he can still get forward and pass the ball around when he's on the field.
Yeah, and also I just to give a few notes of myself on the match. As you said, Zielinski is first of all crucial to that midfield. Like there's no doubt about that. But I personally, where I felt maybe Ruiz should have started is because when I watched the match, I noticed that Zielinski was giving Brozovic a really hard time. Brozovic was trying to man mark him or at least get the better of him, but he couldn't. Zielinski was always, probably winning the duels or, getting past him. And I think he even got a couple of nutmegs in. So yeah, I think this is where Ruiz would have come in handy because I think he's a good progressor of the ball in the first place and his long ball distribution. And I remember Fabian Ruiz. If correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph. The last season, the Coppa Italia match at San Siro, he was the one who scored the long range goal against Padelli. Yeah, but his long range shooting is good as well. So I personally felt this is where he could have come handy. Like maybe because you guys are so good when going forward, you can beat us. That's a really good possibility. And when I say you can beat us, I also want to touch upon the fact that you guys had many more shots than us. On target in general. You guys dominated possession, and honestly, as I pointed out earlier, a lot of Interisti in our fan base feel that we didn't deserve to get away with the win. We sort of escaped with it, and Napoli probably deserved more. So yeah, I mean that's my take on at least why Rui should have started. But I just want to touch upon a couple of players from Napoli. Is how do you feel about Tiemue Bakayoko? There was like he didn't probably arrive until the later part of the Mercato, and he was linked with a lot of clubs. Maybe a return to Milan, but he when he was at Milan back then, he had a really good spell. So how do you feel about him? Like based, I know of course it's too early in the season to comment, but would, given the depth you guys have right now, which is really good in my opinion, would you immediately redeem him at the end of the season? Maybe get into try to get a bargain offer or whatever. But would you really want to keep him?
I would. I think it's a dry loan, so we'd have to just negotiate a purchase. But I can see why Gattuso wanted to bring him in. He's fit in perfectly in that holding midfielder role. We not that we were lacking in that position. That's why I was a little bit surprised we were going after him in the first place, because we had just spent, I think it was somewhere around 23, 24 million euros on them and Lobotka combined. So it didn't seem like that was our most pressing need. I was hoping we would go after a left back, but having him, I can see why Gattuso was so eager to bring him in. He's played such an important role, and it's really nice as a Napoli fan to finally have some size, right? Like we're always one of the smallest teams, and unfortunately, with some of the injuries, we're back to being one of the smallest teams. But Bakayoko's provided that size and strength in that position, and he's performed really well. He's had a couple of hiccups here and there. I mean, he picked up the red card. I can't remember which match it was, but that wasn't good, and he's had some struggles, but for the most part, he's been really really good.
And looking at Bakayoko, that was Bakayoko, but I just want to touch upon one of my personal Napoli favorites. He's just joined y'all this season. It's Victor Osimhen. Osimhen. I'm a big fan of him. Like I've watched him a lot at Lille, and this guy, I can see the potential. He's good aerially. He's good with with his dribbling. Maybe he can improve on his passing, but his aerial ability, ability to hold on to the ball, his late movements into the box. I can really see this guy exploding at Napoli. Like this is probably what you need after once Mertens soon not soon but maybe later hangs up his boots, yeah. And Mertens extending the contract is like the perfect combination because Osimhen gets to learn a lot from him in the meantime. So I just wanted to touch upon one thing is of course Osimhen was pretty expensive. Once he was signed, there was debate in Italy and in France. The transfer fee. I think the French outlets claimed it to be 80 million, whereas Gianluca Di Marzio said it was around 50 million on some players going in exchange. Yeah, but overall, what do you think of Osimhen? Given the fact that you guys had already signed Petania and you had renewed Merton, I guess a lot of Napoli fans felt, oh, we have two strikers, that's more than enough. But now you actually have the luxury of having three, and it's not that Petania is bad. I remember that season he had with Spal. So what do you make of this depth, and what do you make of Osimhen's arrival as a whole?
Yeah, I think there was at the time there was a lot of debate even amongst Napoli fans whether that was the right move for that price tag. Double our record signing from last year at 80 million when you like you said when you add in the value of the players that went to Lille. But I think there's no doubt in anyone's minds now with how he's played that this was a great move. He's, if you look at stats, you're not going to get the full picture on him. He does so much more than just what you see on the stat sheet. And the biggest improvement that we've seen is that with his pace, you can play that outlet ball to him. He can run onto it, and he just creates so much space for everybody around him. So everybody benefits. If you want to look at stats, you have to look at the stats of the other forwards that are playing with him as well, particularly Dries Mertens. We saw it right away. I don't think we were expecting him to be thrown into the starting 11 so quickly, but the impact he had in our first game of the season against Parma earned him the right to start. And it's really unfortunate that he's picked up this shoulder injury at the Nations League. I mean, those things can happen, and it's kind of lingering. He's probably not coming back until January, but we're okay. I think it ended up working out that we did bring in Patania because now we're able to put him in that starting role, especially with Mertens going out. But even if all three were healthy, it was okay to have all three. Initially if going into the season thinking we were going to play a 4-3-3, there was some concerns there that there may have been too many strikers. But in the 4-2-3-1, now we drop Mertens into a more natural 10 position where you don't need to be big. and Osimhen can win the ball, lay off to him, and now you have Mertens taking the shot. That's a really dangerous combination. And then you still have the Petagna option off the bench, who can give you a different look than Mertens can. And even though Osimhen's big, he doesn't have that type of strength that Petagna does. So it's worked out really well, and especially with these recent injuries now, now's Petagna's opportunity to show what he can do.
Yeah, yeah. And just to touch back on Gennaro Gattuso, Joseph, I personally, I guess I don't know how Napoli fans felt initially when he was appointed as the replacement for Carlo Ancelotti, but I just wanted to ask you, what do you make of this tactical change by Gattuso? Because Carlo Ancelotti, as you said, used to play his 4-4-2 and used to deploy Lozano up front, and like there was a part of this season under Ancelotti where you guys dropped a lot of points, and last season wasn't really good. You guys probably should have done better and made it to the Champions League. But yeah, looking at the tactical change, Napoli, if you tell Napoli, if you ask anybody about Napoli, let's say post 2010 or 2011, you all are associated with this, free flowing brand of football, probably with having more of the ball, and which I'm not denying you guys do, but once Gennaro Gattuso was hired and when we saw the initial signs of Gattuso's style of play, there's a lot more defensive, and I guess Napoli showed a better defensive awareness than they have in the past. So what do you make of this? Is this, in your view, the right balance by Gattuso, or would you want Gattuso to adopt something like what Ancelotti did, and maybe you believe Gattuso can do it better?
No, I think he's got the right balance now, especially in the 4-2-3-1. You're right. When we played in that 4-3-3, it was very, very defensive, and especially against the big clubs, we were playing everybody behind the ball and try to strike on the counter. That's not, as a fan base, it's hard to, I guess, enjoy that. I appreciate defense, no doubt, but when you think of big teams, you think of teams that are on the front foot, not sitting back. That being said, you can appreciate why he did it, because, like you mentioned, we had gone on a run of, I can't remember, I don't know if it was like 17 straight matches without a win. It was a ridiculous streak that ultimately cost Ancelotti his job. But so I think Gattuso was saying, okay, let's stop the bleeding first, and then we'll continue. And it was okay. We were fine with the defensive play because we were finally getting results, right? That all we cared about was that we're winning matches. I don't care how those wins come. If that means playing for 0-0 draws in the Coppa Italia and winning in a shootout, fine, as long as we win, and we did. And the other reason I was okay with the 4-3-3 is because that free flowing style that you mentioned, that wasn't really from Ancelotti. That was from Maurizio Sarri, and he played in a 4-3-3, and he built, or De Laurentiis built this club for Sarri's 4-3-3. So it made sense to go back to that, because most of the players that were still with the club were from that Maurizio Sarri era. Sorry, and now Gattuso's just augmented that with improvements like Osimhen and Bakayoko. So I think he's got the right balance now in the 4-2-3-1. We still have the ability to defend well. We usually drop into a 4-5-1 or a 4-4-2 on the defending side of things, and then we can get forward in that 4-2-3-1 when we attack.
Yeah, I agree on that. That actually comes from Sarri, the free-flowing blend of football. But I guess Gattuso has really bolstered the defensive aspect of it. Also, Joseph, when I look at Napoli's squad from the Sarri era, where I felt, when you all launched a Scudetto challenge, I felt you all really lacked the depth at that time, options on the bench you could turn to. But this time you really boast that you have Stanislav Lobotka, who's pretty decent in my opinion. You have Diego Demma. You have, your bench is pretty complete this time around. But one area that concerns me, in my opinion, at least for Napoli, are the fullbacks. I'm just going to be very specific with this. I feel Giovanni Di Lorenzo is good, but when I look at backups like Kevin Malcui, when I look at Elsid Husay, because Husay is someone who's been always linked, with a move away from Napoli, there's nothing materializing. And on the left-hand side, you have Mario Rui, who's also supposed to leave, and then, you have a backup in Fauzi Ghulam, who was really good up until his major injury. So do you think this is like big concern for Napoli because there's no guarantee, at least about, let's say, on the left hand side, you don't have guarantee of whether Mario Rui is the man to go in the to go with in the future as well, and on the right you don't probably have a backup option, a good backup option is what I mean. So do you really think this area is where Napoli now is supposed to address? Maybe if not January, maybe in the summer as well.
Absolutely, yeah. You've hit it. You've hit the nail on the head. I think Di Lorenzo, Italian national team, world class, very good, but no backup. And what we've seen is, Malqui. Actually, I was just looking at this yesterday. From the time that he tore his ACL, he played only, I think it was 6 minutes last season, which was the second to last match against Inter, and then he played 15 minutes this season, which was as a sub against Atalanta. That's it, 21 minutes since that injury, and it's partially because he's still had some nagging injuries with that same knee, and partially because he hasn't won the favor of Gattuso with his play. And what we've seen is lately Di Lorenzo has been struggling, and that's not a huge shock either because he's played the full 90 minutes in all but one match for us. So I think fatigue is starting to catch up with him. When you look at the goal that Sampdoria scored against us, he kind of got caught. Even against Milan, he got caught a couple times. But again, when you're playing that many minutes, it's eventually going to take a toll. So we definitely need someone that we trust to play as that backup right back. LC Kusai was kind of that player. I mean, what we saw, the reason why Gattuso likes him so much is because he has the flexibility to play on the left and on the right. So whether he's playing as a starter or playing as a sub, he can give guys rest and we can rotate between the three. And then Mario Rui, as you mentioned, is the other left back. I thought Mario Rui actually was pretty good for the second half of last year, but definitely a position that we can look to upgrade. Fauzi Gulam, I think what they're trying to do is we've seen him play a little bit more lately. I think they're trying to get him some minutes to kind of showcase him to the rest of the world because there's been very little interest. And part of that is because of his salary. I think he makes 2.5, 3 million euros a season. So that's a lot for a player that hasn't really played all that much in the last little while since his knee injuries. So yeah, I think that's definitely a position we need to target. I don't know if it's going to happen in January with COVID and how much clubs are hurting financially. We had our first year in the red in a while. I suspect summertime is when these things are going to happen, and a lot of that will come down to what happens with our existing players. I think specifically LC Kusai, he's been kind of on again, off again. With sometimes his agent says he wants to move on, then sometimes he says he wants to stay. We know Gattuso wants to keep him. I think that might just come down to one, whether Napoli qualify for the Champions League, and two, what we'd be willing to pay him if we kept him. If he goes on, then we probably need to bring in a couple of fullbacks.
Moving on, Joseph, I would just like to look at a couple of links between the two clubs, Inter and Napoli. First is Matteo Politano. Of course, he was signed by us in the 18-19 season when from Sassuolo on loan, and we had a verbal agreement to, get it done permanently. And of course, with Spalletti, things were different. We played a 4-2-3-1. He was the right winger, but Politano, I was really excited when he came in, okay? But as things passed by, what I noticed about Politano was that in our approach, he could never, like majority of the matches, let's say 90% of the games, he would never last a full 90 minutes. And as things passed by, once Antonio Conte came, everybody realized that, we are going to play 3-5-2, so he has probably no place. He was pretty much being used as the vice Lukaku, which he isn't, right? So, of course, once he was shipped out, of course, you guys have bought him on loan plus obligation, if I'm not wrong. This summer is when you'll be paying us around 21.5 million euros. But what I've noticed about Politano lately is, he's proving to be the impact sub for you guys. He's against us also the other day in the match, he really brought that energy on. Like he probably felt like he had a point to prove to Inter, because I remember his comments like maybe a couple of months ago or something. He said that, I have a lot of bitter memories over there and I probably want to take revenge or something. But yeah, he came on with the right energy in the match. He really wanted to make that difference, and he probably could have got an assist or a goal. So I just want to get your thoughts on it. Like, what do you feel? Do you think he's the right kind of player to have maybe more like an impact sub, or maybe you could see him starting in the future more often, giving Lozano that competition? Or do you think you all could have probably gone for someone like even though he's a primarily a left winger, Jeremiah Boga, because he was linked with you guys as well. You know. So what do you make of it all?
Yeah, I'll start with Politano. I didn't like that signing at all when that happened. For the price that we paid and how he was playing at the time. Um, I thought we overpaid for him, and his play in the latter half of last season, I guess from the time we got him onwards, to me wasn't good enough to justify the price. But it's kind of similar to Lozano last year, where you sometimes need to give players time to adapt to a new system, a new coach, and he's been much better this year. So, like I said earlier, he gives us another option on that wing. I don't even consider him a super sub. I consider him and Lozano to be 1A, 1B. I know most Napoli fans think Lozano should be the number one. I personally think they offer you two different options. And again, you pick the one that gives you the better advantage depending on the opponent. Obviously, he's left-footed and Lozano's right-footed. So when Politano plays, he can play more like Insigne does on the left wing, except on the right wing, where he can cut into the middle of the field on his left foot, and that's where he scored his goals. And in cutting into the middle, then Di Lorenzo can get forward on the overlap on the right wing. So that's a bit of a different look. When you have Lozano on the field, he attacks the wing more because he's right-footed and can look to play the cross and get by people with his speed, which we saw against Inter as well. So I think it's two good options right now because of Kusai being out for a while with COVID and going to take some time to get back to fitness. I do want to see Lozano play a little bit more, not so much because I think he's better. I mean, he's on fire right now, so you want to ride that, but also again because with Lozano on, Di Lorenzo doesn't need to get forward as much, so he can rest a little bit, which, as we mentioned, he needs a bit of that rest. But, you're right. Politano, I thought he was going to start this match because he has that bit of bad blood with Inter. He said he felt like he wasn't treated well there. So I thought Gattuso might give him that opportunity to get his revenge, but two good options.
Yeah, that was about Politano. And the second link I want to talk about is Arkadiusz Milik. And why I call this a link is because he's being linked with us quite a few times before the January window. And of course, he's been frozen out of the squad, right? Because and it's nothing to do, it's not Napoli's fault because he asked to leave. It's just that, the deal with Roma collapsed and everything. So I want to get your perspective, Joseph, on if we were to somehow get, let's say, Arkadiusz Milik as a vice Lukaku, do you really think this would be a good move for a team of Antonio, like, in terms of how Antonio Conte operates? Do you really think he is the proper vice Lukaku to go to? And do you think that would probably elevate our quality in terms of, having being spoiled for depth, like being spoiled for choice in terms of depth?
Yeah, I'm not too sure how well he would fit in an Inter system, to be honest. You want a player like, I mean, Lukaku is impossible to replace because he's got the size and strength to hold up and lay off, but also the quality to finish himself. One of the big issues we had with Milik was that, besides the injury concerns, which is always something to be worried about, is that he wasn't very good at finishing. I mean, yes, if you look at the stats and his goals per minute ratio or whatever, it's pretty good, but he would often miss chances. And I just wonder, we'll see if Conte is still in charge at the end of this season, but I just wonder if he starts to struggle under Conte, if he finds himself, even though he'd be a sub anyways, probably riding the bench quite a bit.
Yeah. And just to I just wanted to get your perspective on a few things, Inter, if that's fine with you. Of course, this Scudetto race I personally feel is going to be really close. You of course have AC Milan flying high, unbeaten. Juventus, who have been drawing but are unbeaten. Inter and Napoli in the top four are the only ones who have lost. But what do you make of this Inter side in general? Because a lot of fans, a lot of Interisti in general have been saying we've weakened since last season, since we let Diego Godin go. We've been using Ivan Perisic as a makeshift left wing back. So where do you see Inter lining up? Because we've been conceding a lot, and the whole Christian Eriksen mess. He's on his way out, injury problems. What do you think? Do you really think this Inter side can go on to win the Scudetto, or do you think it's going to be someone else?
I think they can. Maybe not if they were still in Europe, but I think being knocked out of the Champions League and not qualifying for Europa League, finishing at the bottom of that group, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be competing for the Scudetto. I agree, Inter have conceded more goals after, I think you guys were probably conceded fewest goals in the league all season last season, something like 36 goals all season. But lately, Inter have been better defensively. I was looking at this when I worked on my preview for our match, and I think Inter conceded 8 goals in the first 4 games, and then in the following 7 in Serie A, they only conceded 7. So things seem to be going well. I know it's probably not as sound defensively as it was last season, but I think that's fine. The wing backs, yes. I mean, I think we all thought Hakimi would be playing more, but credit to Darmian, he's kind of played himself into that starting role. The left side, probably a bit of a concern between Ashley Young and even Perisic, who's kind of, for what it's worth, at least Perisic is kind of flexible. We've seen him play as one of the attacking players as well when players have been out or whatnot. So I think Inter have enough quality and enough depth that there's no reason why they shouldn't be competing for the Scudetto.
Yeah, that was that. And now I just wanted to have a different take and look at something different. Is I just wanted to probably discuss if we had to pick a combined 11 for Inter and Napoli. How would you go about it? Let's say if you had to pick a formation to begin with, and just a few players, no limit on the number of Napoli players. Of course, you can go all out if you want. That's fine. So, but I just want to get your perspective on it.
Yeah, that's really tough because they're different formations, different styles. But maybe if we were to start at the back, I mean, even that's tough. Handanovic hasn't been his greatest. And then we switch between Meret and Ospina. So, but I'm quite content with that rotation. If I had to pick between any of those 3 keepers, I would go with Alex Meret. I would play a 4-man back line. But that's where it's kind of tricky because you guys don't really have fullbacks. You have the wing backs and the 3 center backs in the 3-5-2. But Koulibaly has to go in there. I think Bastoni has to go in there, and then who you play at those wider positions, probably Di Lorenzo on the right, and then we can just pick anyone as the left back. I don't like our options, but maybe maybe I don't know if you suggest anyone on Inter that could play left back. I really don't know. And then in the midfield, you have to have Barella there. I'd probably go with Bakayoko as the holding mid, and then I do a 3-man midfield with Barella and Zielinski. And then up top, if we're playing, it's kind of tricky because who do you pick between Osimhen and Lukaku? I think you have to go Lukaku right now. I mean, the way he's playing, Insigne on the left, and then again with a 3-5-2, maybe I'd push Hakimi up as the right wing.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, you're pretty much spot on with that because it's a dilemma. We have completely different styles of play. Completely different players. It's not easy to pick. But I just wanted to get your thoughts in general about a man people can't stop talking about. And, I guess he invites most of that pressure on himself. What do you make of Antonio Conte, Joseph? Because I can relate. Yeah, because he is such an unpredictable human being in general. So one day he's happy, and the other day, even if you win a match, he'll go on and throw a tantrum. So just to link it to Napoli as well, is like of course Conte delivers. He can deliver, but he's a bit too rigid. He has his flaws. But is this someone? Let's say if Gattuso was never an option, let's say just assume, and if Conte wasn't at Inter, if he had someone like Allegri, just to make a hypothesis. And if Antonio Conte was a free agent, would you want him to replace Carlo Ancelotti, knowing what Conte is like, knowing his European record, his outbursts, knowing the fact that at times if you don't spend, he doesn't like it. So what do you make of it all here?
Yeah, and I think that last point is the reason why I would say no, because De Laurentiis is a big personality, Conte is a big personality. I think that would just be a recipe for disaster. There's no doubt he has a winning track record, and that's the part that it makes it intriguing because since Maradona won the Scudetti back in the late 90s, we haven't won a Scudetto. We've won the Coppa Italia a couple times, 3 times since then, but Conte has a winning mentality, a winning track record. But just like Interisti knew when they brought him in, that this is not a coach that's going to stay at a club for a long time. He's going to come for 3-4 years. He's going to make you spend a couple €100 million, and that hopefully works and you win some silverware. If it doesn't, it can leave you in a really, really bad position. And that's kind of what Inter is facing at the moment. With the Suning group, I think they've been great in supporting him, and they're not De Laurentiis, right? Like, very sort of calm presence. At least Conte hasn't had too many tirades this year. I feel like that meeting they had with all the Inter brass, like there was a decision made there where upper management said, okay, look, we'll bring in some of these guys like Kolarov and Arturo Vidal and Perisic, because you want them, but only on the condition that you cut out this nonsense with the media and crying and screaming and all these tantrums, because we haven't really seen too much of that from Conte. And it was probably also on the understanding that if you don't win something, and maybe even if you do, you're out of here at the end of this season. What's really concerning is if Inter don't win. I think you're probably safe if you finish in the top four because you have that Champions League revenue. But if somehow something happens and you slide out of that top four, Inter's in big trouble financially.
I couldn't agree more, Joseph, because we are in such a situation wherein if it's like, it's become sort of an obligation to win the Scudetto, I guess, because we just crashed out badly in the Champions League. It's the first time ever we have finished last in the group stages in our history. So I pretty much agree, and I guess if you're basically having De Laurentiis and Conte on the same side, it's a recipe for disaster, I guess. And yeah, I mean, yes, it's like Conte does leave these squads behind, which are not highly qualitative. He left that at Chelsea, it's a mess, and it could probably happen with us again. You never know. So I guess I can understand why you would probably not take Conte and why Gattuso, in my opinion, so far when I look at him, the job he's done, even last season when you all went through such a hard time, he still won the Coppa Italia. I think that's a big feat to begin with in his not even a complete season, as you had pointed out. So just to look at things generally, just to look at the last few things before we cap off, Joseph, I am personally a big fan of the depth you guys have. Like, I'm really impressed with how Napoli recruited this season. I was really happy, as I said, when Osimhen came in. Another plus point for me was Amir Rahmani, from Hellas Verona. He had a really good season, and we all know how good they are. And you have him as a backup. That's so good. So with this depth in mind, Joseph, do you really think you guys have a shot at least two trophies? Let's say, if not the Scudetto, I am not, of course, ruling you out of the Scudetto race, but let's say, if not the Scudetto, maybe the Europa League and the Coppa Italia, because the Europa League, I know there are good teams. Manchester United have dropped down. You have Tottenham Hotspur as well. But when I look at your team, Joseph, I really feel you guys can really go on to win the Europa League and maybe one more trophy. So what do you believe? Like, do you really believe you can at least go on and win two trophies this season?
Yeah, I think we have the quality to do it. We have that depth. But for me, the most important thing right now, and not to sound like I work for the club or something, but we need to get back into the Champions League. That is the number one goal. I consider our season this year very similar to Lazio last season, where your main target is to get into the Champions League. It's even higher priority, I think, for us than it was for Lazio, because we've been there for the last nearly the entire decade. And so to fall out of it once is not good, because there's such a dramatic difference in revenue between Champions League and Europa League. Each time you miss the Champions League, it gets a little bit harder to get back in, and a little bit harder because you don't have that revenue, which means you can't buy more players, and the quality of your team goes down. And we've seen that with Milan over the last little while, and now they're just finally kind of playing their way back into it. So for me, the number one goal is to get back into the Champions League. But I think we have the quality to compete, maybe not on all three fronts, but to win the Coppa Italia, it's essentially winning 5 matches in a row, 4 or 5 matches, whatever it is. So that's possible. That's probably the lowest priority. Europa League, we definitely have a squad that's capable of winning it. And I think that's the type of trophy where it becomes more important as you advance each round. I would still, and a lot of Napoli fans disagree with me on this one, but I would still use my best 11 in Serie A. And then, as you mentioned, with those depth pieces, whether it's Petagna or Rahmani, I'm really surprised he hasn't played, but we have an oversupply at center back at the moment because we have Maksimovic that has been our Europa League center back. I'd like to see Koulibaly get a bit more rest because he's been playing every single game as well. So we have that. We have, you mentioned Lobotka. I really like Lobotka. He's kind of been the outcast because of Bakayoko and Demme. And then, where we lack a little bit of depth, I guess, is in the attacking midfield. We have Elmas who can kind of play there. He can also play on the wing. We've seen him play there, but a bit of a step down in quality from Fabian and Zielinski. And then Petagna up top as the alternate for Osimhen at striker. So as long as we're rotating and still trying to compete on all fronts, I'm cool with that. What I don't want to see is that we're playing our best 11 in the Europa League and in Serie A, and then you see guys get tired, you see injuries, and that could be an issue. And back to the Lazio example, I think our mentality is the same as well, where it's, okay, we know that we have the quality of squad that we can compete for the Scudetto, but we want to get into the top four. And if we get into the final quarter of the season, let's say, and we're up there, then yes, then we start saying, okay, we're going for the Scudetto. But with this team, you have to take it one game at a time because mentality has been we have a very fragile team as far as mentality goes. So we don't want to get into a situation where we lose confidence and then that's it, we're toast.
Yeah, Joseph, just to point out your surprise about Rahmani not starting enough. When Manolas was signed in for Napoli, I was like, if I put on the neutral hat, I wasn't pretty excited in terms of what he had to offer, because I personally felt he was never a great ball distributor, which is what Napoli need. And this is where Albiol per se was underrated, in my opinion, at least. I don't know if you agree, but since he's come in, I have not really seen Koulibaly and Manolas gel in perfectly as people. I remember people saying this is the best centre back duo in the Serie A and everything, but it's not really worked. Like, at least what I feel, it's not been up to the mark as to what people expected. So in that sense, would you want Gattuso to try like a duo of Koulibaly, Rahmani, or maybe let's say because Koulibaly is pretty much irreplaceable, but maybe even Manolas, Rahmani. Like, what do you make of that? Like, what do you think? Do you think Manolas should be benched for a few games? Or what's your take on it?
I agree that certainly last season Koulibaly and Manolas did not gel well. Their chemistry was a bit off. I've found so far they've been a lot better together this season. So I wonder if they just needed the time to get used to each other. I think what's also been helping Manolas is he's only been playing Serie A, and Maksimovic has been playing Europa League. So that's worked out in a couple of ways. One, it ensures that Maksimovic gets playing time, and then it ensures that Manolas only plays once a week, so the risk of injury is lower because we saw he got hurt in training last season. Um, Unfortunately, it means that Rahmani is a bit of the odd man out. He was brought in because the way Napoli do business is we like to sign the replacement player before we sell the player he's replacing. So the plan was to sell Koulibaly, and Rahmani was the guy that was going to come in, and maybe it would have been a combination of Manolas and Maksimovic at the start, and then slowly work Rahmani into that fold, and eventually make him one of our starters. He's been told, be patient, your time will come, you're going to play, and so he's doing a good job of just waiting for his turn. But yeah, I think Koulibaly and Manolas are doing fine. I think most Napoli fans in the end were happy we didn't sell Koulibaly. He's one of the best center backs in the world. We think he is the best. Everyone was talking about Van Dijk, and then he had a bad start to the season before he got hurt. But and it's a good problem to have. I don't know if the plan is still to sell Koulibaly next summer or see what we can get for him and then bring Rahmani in, or we'll see where we go. There's been talks even about possibly selling Maksimovic, and then now you have a pretty nice combination of center backs with Koulibaly, Manolas, and Rahmani as the three.
Yeah, just before I cap off, Joseph, for last 2 points, Dries Mertens, of course, a club legend and whatnot. It didn't feel nice to see him get injured in that match, and it was really painful. As I said, I hope he recovers soon. He was being heavily linked with us, and we had contact with him, But I personally felt that he, of course, used our interest just to get a better deal from you guys, because he loves the city, he loves the club. How just tell me maybe simply how happy are you that he's extended, because he's such a pivotal role for that team. He can guide Osimhen in so many ways. He gives you that depth with, and as you said, he slots in behind Osimhen these days when he's fit. So just how elated are you, and what, like, just your thoughts on the Mertens situation?
Yeah, I'm very very happy that he didn't leave it. It seemed like he was going. Maybe you're right. Maybe he was just leveraging Inter to get a better contract. I think he ends up staying with this club even beyond his playing days in some capacity as a youth coach or one of the assistants. As you mentioned, he loves the city. We call him Chiro, which is a Napolitan name, right? And yeah, on the field, he's provided us so much flexibility, and that's how we've been able to withstand this Osimhen injury, because with he can play in the striker. That's where he played in the 4-3-3 under Sadi, so we know he can play there. When Osimhen's playing, he can play in the 10 spot behind him. And then now also we've been benefiting from Zielinski playing in the 10 spot, so he's got flexibility. So yeah, no, I'm elated that we kept him. I'm happy to see that he's going to retire with Napoli.
Yeah. Just one, last two things is I want to know, like, of course, we discussed a combined 11, but if you just had to pick one player from Inter, like, who could probably fit into your team and maybe you could be a problem solver, who would it be? Before I get on to you, I personally feel that if I had to pick someone from Napoli, it would probably be Fabian Ruiz, because we probably have, I personally feel at times we lack depth, and or maybe Diego Dema as well, because Conte loves this defensive type of midfielders, and Dema is so disciplined. But with Ruiz, I feel his work rate and his distribution skills are so good, and since we are probably gonna just let Ericsson go, maybe if that luxury ever arises, maybe we could have probably gotten Ruiz. Of course, it's not possible, but yeah. But coming back to you, Joseph, if you had to pick that one player from Inter, who would it be?
Well, maybe we can broker a swap, because I would without a doubt take Nicolo Barella. So you could take Fabian, I'll take Barella off your hands. I think one of the things is I like Fabian quite a bit, but he's been relatively inconsistent. You mentioned that goal that he scored against Inter, but he hasn't scored enough. And it feels like perhaps this system isn't his best system to play in. I actually wanted to see him get a chance in the 10 spot. We ended up putting Zielinski there and it's worked out very well. But I think Fabian can, like you mentioned, sort of that Ericsson position. I think he can excel there, because he's a good passer. He's got the height, even though he doesn't win a lot of balls in the air, and he has the shot when he takes it. Um, I would take Barella from you guys, just because we do lack that creativity in the midfield, and I know you guys would never let him go, but since we're just pretending, that's definitely the guy I would want to steal. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously Lukaku is the other one that comes to mind, but with the strikers that we have, and having Osimhen, you can't really have both of them. So definitely Barella.
And finally, Joseph, to just cap things off, I want to get your thoughts on the Scudetto race in general. It's been a really competitive Serie A, even last season. Now, this time around, things are really heating up. For me, there are four teams in it, and I won't probably, with the way Roma are going, you can't sleep on them, in my opinion. You all are there, AC Milan, of course, Juventus and us. So, how do you see things panning out? Do you really think this will go down to the wire until the last day? Is that possible? And lastly, I would just want to get your thoughts on which teams would get relegated, the bottom three, and that probably, let's say, the top six for you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, top of the table, I do think Inter is the favorite now. Unless some of these other clubs, if Juventus gets knocked out of the Champions League in the first round, or if Napoli gets knocked out of the Europa League, I have, or same thing with Milan. I have Inter as the favorites. I think Juve second. Milan, I'm still not convinced. I know it's like, what is it going to take to convince people that Milan are a good team? I think they'll probably finish in the top four. I don't think they're going to drop off that dramatically. I think we have to see what happens in these next couple of games. They've started to slip up a little bit, but they've shown that resolve to be able to come back late in matches and at least get a point out of those games. But I do think they're going to drop a little bit. Roma has been a big surprise for me with how well they've been playing, considering they have new ownership, and with their financial troubles, they couldn't really bring in too many players. Pedro, who they did bring in, has made a big impact, and Mkhitaryan has kind of been like Lozano, where he's starting to play really really well, and sometimes the best deals you make are the ones that you don't make, and that was the case with Edin Dzeko. So Roma in the mix, but I'm going to put Napoli in the top four just because I need them to be there. I'd for the fifth and sixth, I'd go with Roma, and that last spot is I think up for grabs, whether it's Roma is fifth, and then whether it's Sassuolo or Atalanta, we'll see what happens with the whole Duvan Zapata, Papu Gomez situation. Can Lazio get back in there? They're really struggling. I'm gonna give that one to Atalanta, the sixth spot. At the bottom of the table, Crotone definitely going down. The next two have been tricky. I initially had Spezia as one of the other ones, and I believe I had Udinese there. Udinese lately have gotten some results. They've shot up to the middle of the table. Now you have Genoa, Fiorentina, kind of lingering down there. I'm hoping Benevento stay up just because they're from the south, and I want to see more southern teams stay in Serie A. I'm gonna go, Torino probably, unless Gianpaolo can figure things out quickly. They're in a bit of a tailspin, assuming he keeps his job. And then I'll say Genoa, but I really don't know about that last one.
Yeah, that's some really interesting predictions, Joseph. So yeah, I guess on that note, we can cap off the podcast. And first of all, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Of course, you're really busy and all. You have your own podcast to run, and I'm an avid listener, so I'm looking forward to the next one already. Thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and I personally hope Napoli bounce back, because the Serie A needs this. We all know what Napoli is capable of in the Champions League once they're back. I know they can do well in the Serie A and the Champions League combined. We have seen that. So and I'm personally someone who wants Italian teams to do well in the Champions League when it comes to that. So I really hope you guys bounce back. It was a pleasure to have you, and thank you. So yeah, I mean, thank you to everyone for listening, and I'll be leaving Joseph's Twitter handle and podcast links in the description. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Joseph, for coming.
Thank you so much. It was nice chatting with you, and I appreciate you listening to the show.
Thank you, Joseph.